it. I was like, I don't want to hear any of this. So then she asked for tea time, and it's helped me. It's helped me to have tea time. So from my end, I really like to, I mean, everything Paul and Jenny said is completely right. And I think Paul said, if you have Christ in you, you see someone, you want to get to know them. I know Ravi Zachariah, some of you who are listening know him. There was a memorial service for him the other week. But what really struck me was they talked about what he saw when he looked at people. And they said he really saw that people were made in the image of God. And because of that, he valued them extremely. So, I was thinking I would never react in anger to the president of the Philippines. Yet I react in anger to my wife because familiarity breeds a sort of contempt. And so, like Paul said, we should always not get used to our spouses in that sense. We should always look at getting to know them more, loving them more, and all because God said, a person is very valuable. In fact, I died for this person. So we should, so this helps because there are times at night where when Jennifer goes into her stream of consciousness,
but not all the time, just so y'all know.
If I'm in the right mindset, if my heart is thinking of her value, it's okay actually for me. If she just has a need to unload, sometimes it's okay for me just to listen. It doesn't always have to be, you have to talk my way. So if both of us see each other that way, then Jennifer will be thinking, Peter doesn't like it at night when I rant and go crazy.
It's ranting. It's like what the kids did. It's like everywhere. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I say ranting because that's my definition of what happens. But she can. It's not ranting. Okay. Sorry.
Go.
It's not ranting.
Okay.
It's stream of consciousness. So when she goes into stream of consciousness mode, I can actually appreciate it because I think God made her special. This is important for her, and then. When she knows I don't want it, she can also appreciate and say, I'll wait till tomorrow. So if both of us are thinking of the other person, then it's both giving, then it's okay. It gets better and better. So I think that's important, the value of a person. We talked a lot. On to the next couple.
Thank you, guys. The Joy's whispering a lot of things in my ear while you guys are talking. It's wonderful to see all these insights. Let's hear from Jeff and Candy, who were married around the same time as Peter and Jen. I think just a month apart, yeah?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks. That's right. We were all there for that. So
I let my older brother go first. So it's just fair. For me, when you guys were asking that question, a verse that came up to mind that was actually important in Jeff and I marriage earlier on was Ephesians 4, verse 32. And it says, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you. And I remember when we were dating, and early in our marriage, we're so sweet to each other. When people are first in love, they talk really kindly and they're very thoughtful and they're careful not to get angry at one another. And as you go along in marriage, you kind of take each other for granted and your tone changes and you're not as sweet and you just expect the other person to be okay with it. So that familiarity that Peter was saying kind of breeds contempt. And I remember talking to Jeff one time and said, babe, I kind of miss those days where you used to just be really sweet to me and talk tenderly to me. And I said, it means a lot to me when you try and do that and make me feel loved and special, just even in your tone, the way you speak to me, like when we were dating. And he really took it to heart. And I really found him change and be more sweet and really tender. And I can say we've grown in that area, and he's definitely very loving to me. And I really appreciate him changing in that area. And then for me, one of the things that I would do that would make our communication difficult is sometimes I would add jabs in our conversations, like when I'm upset and things that I know would hurt him because I'm upset, I know what to say to put a little jab in there. And I would do that. And God convicted me that doesn't benefit anything. And then your conversation gets sidetracked because now you were talking about one topic, and then if you're and hurting it, then your focus is off. So that for me was me trying not to hurt his feelings and consciously, step. So I think that helped a lot.
Nice. Yeah, jabs are not sweet.
No.
I think one communication principle that's maybe more on just the on a practical side is we found through the years that although we have 4 kids and life gets busy on a day-to-day basis, we don't have a regular that we've established over the years. But we find times, and there's small moments, it could be half an hour after the kids go to bed or whatever it may be, but we find those moments often enough and consistent enough where it helps in our communication. It's really, honestly, at times it's our only time to communicate about what's going on in our lives, but we just know that about each other, and it's something we've kind of learned over the years is we have to find those moments, otherwise we kind of drift away and then lose touch.
Thanks, guys. We noticed things like time. We're taking notes of all these things, and I think even as we share this, it's good to see the different vantage points. Let's hear now from the Bunsos, Joel and Carolyn.
Bunso, okay, we don't talk much. No, okay, go.
I think, well, we have been married the shortest, and probably we have a lot to improve on when it comes to communication. But as we were thinking about the question, one of the things that has helped us is, at least for me on my end, is I try to find the time to fit into Joel's schedule for talking. So like I heard a lot of people saying that it's, different spouses like it at different times. So for example, with Joel, he doesn't like it. He doesn't like me to tell him things first thing in the morning because he's actually gearing for work. And he's thinking so much about work that if I tell him some other problems, it kind of throws him off. So the best time for him was usually at night when the kids are sleeping and pretty late. So sometimes it does require sometimes a little bit of giving of yourself. Like, I like to rest earlier, but then that's his time. And so we'll just sit by the table maybe and I'll just listen to what he wants to share about. And that helps because that helps us to connect. And yeah.
Bro, for me, I think all of the valid points, right? Find time to talk, make time for it. But for me, I think one of the things for the couples who are watching out there, we're not perfect. Don't get me wrong, like we look silly and all that, but we're not perfect, obviously. But I think it's important to be able to talk about topics that you're not comfortable about. So I think that's helped us a lot more than just the amount of talking, because like for me, I'm not used to just chattering away every day, right? If that's your personality, go ahead. But for me, sometimes I like to keep to myself and process things in my head. And after I process before I can explain myself, especially if it's serious stuff, right? So, but I think at the end of the day, it's the willingness to be able to talk about the things that you're afraid of talking to your wife about. Like for me, that would be probably temptations on lust, right? Or if I'm struggling with certain things and I find it difficult to talk about that stuff, I will, even though I don't want it, I'm fine to talk to her about it. And I think for her, Carolyn tries to make an effort. For example, if she's, which I'm pretty bad about, like if there are a lot of deaths that's happening around, and she's trying to grieve about certain things, and she's crying. Like for me, like, why are you crying? But she needs to cry. So because she cries a lot. So just being like,
she's crying now, Joel. You made her cry.
I'm looking at her, looking at the camera.
Okay.
Because that's happening around, and she's trying to grieve about certain things, and she's crying. Like for me, like, why are you crying? But she needs to cry. So because she cries a lot. So just being like,
she's crying now, Joel. You made her cry.
I'm looking at her, looking at the camera.
I'm pregnant. It's okay. There were a lot of deaths, so I had to process that.
Yeah. So there, just being willing to go over a limb, I guess, to talk about things that's not what happened during the day. That's not just the kids, not just what happened with your work, right? More of things that are difficult.
And just one more thing too. Joel's also mentioned before that, he appreciates it when we don't, because the tendency when you have kids is to talk about kids a lot. And so he appreciates it when we talk about other topics. And then one of the things I realized too, which I don't do all the time, but helps, is if I think about what are the topics he wants to talk about, and then that kind of gets him to start talking, and then maybe later he'll also be able to reciprocate that and respond. And if not, well, we still had a good conversation about the topic you wanted to talk about. So
Thank you, guys. You know, speaking of honesty, which is what we heard Joel and Carolyn saying, there's a question from our viewer here. April is asking essentially how to communicate better with your spouse, especially when you're easily tempted to just blurt it out. So speaking of honesty, you know, she's saying, I think as a wife, maybe she just blurts it out and sometimes disrespectfully because she wants to be honest. Can maybe the wives here speak to that? What are your thoughts on encouraging and guiding April here? Mom.
unmute yourself.
Share the verse in Ephesians. It reminded me of Ephesians 4:29, which says, "Let no unwholesome word come from your mouth, but only such a word as is good according to